It is the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today we're going to look ahead to Fulham's game against Palace at Craven Cottage on Saturday. Can we build on our last two wins? Maybe make it 3 league wins in a row. That has not happened this season yet. Also, we'll have the final word on Forest from Saturday, some emails and a tribute to the late Patrick Barclay. I am joined today on the Thursday Club by Jack Collins as ever. Hello.
Hello, Sammy. How you doing?
Good, thank you. And Dan Crawford joins us as well. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, very well, thanks, mate. It's been a tough week, but I'm sure we'll talk about that. But thanks for having me on.
No, we'll get into this now. This is the first podcast we've recorded since the desperately sad news that we found out on Friday that journalist and Fulham fan, Dundee fan as well, but he had a massive soft spot for Fulham, Patrick Barclay, passed away. You might have seen the tributes at the Nottingham Forest game by the club. Obviously, there was a celebration day in total, but there was also another mention for Patrick as well. Obviously, desperately sad news. Patrick had been on this podcast a few times, both as a guest and also at the Fulhamish Live last April. I guess start with you, Dan. I know you knew Patrick really well, just both professionally and personally. It's obviously terribly sad news. He was a really great man.
He was a great man. He'd love that you can call him Patrick. Nobody calls him Patrick, not even his sons, son and daughter. Paddy was somebody who, and I can't believe we're speaking about him in the past tense. Paddy is someone who was immensely encouraging of anyone who wanted to write or talk about football or anything, frankly. And the first thing to say is he loved the two of you and the podcast that you put out. He literally messaged me, and my phone's over there now, but I'll show you later, after that Fulhamish Live, and said it's one of the best days of his life. He never thought he'd be at the Half Moon, like holding fort, although he used to behind the other side of the bar, prop it up regularly. But immensely sad because he had a lot more to give. And yes, he was a Dundee fan because he was from Dundee. But he went from the Dundee Evening Telegraph to Manchester to the Guardian to cover, principally to cover Sir Alex Ferguson, and they were great foes. And one of the most revealing things about the last few days is the warmth of the tribute from Sir Alex Ferguson, because it was thought that Sir Alex would never forgive Paddy for being absolutely right about everything that he wrote for The Guardian and then for subsequent newspapers in respect of Sir Alex Ferguson's team selection or whatever it was that bothered Sir Alex. So there's that. But of course, when he retired, and he was obviously at the substandard, which is what we called it and still call it, he made me a customer of said organ for the time that he finished his journalism career as a columnist for the Substandard. He then retired and took up residence in Johnny Haynes' C Block, and you both know just how much he loved Fulham. He lived in Barnes. He could walk there within 20 minutes from the White Hart, where he would drink and be merry at unseasonable times of the day or the evening or whatever. He loved Tom Kearney's left foot. And it was only replaced, obviously, by Joe Bryan's left foot when Joe did what he did at Wembley. But he loved Fulham. And, he as I said somewhere else, he absolutely castigated Alexander Mitrovic for what Alexander Mitrovic did at Old Trafford a couple of years ago. But he loved Marco Silva. He just got Fulham. He said it was the place that welcomed him most. He loved Craven Cottage. There's obviously the Archibald Leach link between Dundee and Fulham. It's desperately sad, but there's also a point about journalism. The reason he loved the two of you and the organisation that you've set up is because you purposefully went out there to find fresh voices and fresh talent and to give them an opportunity. This ruffian here, barely, could barely form complete sentences a few years ago, and look what you've done to him now. But there's a very serious point to this as well, which is Paddy based his chairmanship of the Football Writers Association around expanding that organisation and opening it up to students and particularly women. And so you've not introduced Yaz yet, and that's a failing of yours.
Yasmin's behind the mic on the buttons.
Yaz is on the buttons, and Lizzie was on the buttons the last time I was here. But the point is, Paddy championed female participation in sport, in journalism in particular, at a time when it was a dinosaur, and it was seen as, women can't talk about football, women can't write about football, they should make the sandwiches and they should sort of stay there. And, Paddy ended all of that, and it probably cost him a little bit with some of his colleagues because they feared that women would be talking and writing about football. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And the key thing is to remember Paddy for everything that he did and how he's done it, and I hope that we'll be able to keep his legacy going. That's one of the things I want to ask, principally the two of you, but the Fulhamish community as well. We've had for a long time with Hammy the Danny Fulbrook Fund, which funds young journalism, and wouldn't it be nice, given how much he loved Fulhamish, if we had a sort of Paddy Barclay Award every year for a young Fulham fan who wants to get into journalism. And I think that would be an apt way to remember the man he was and keep his legacy going.
Yeah, brilliantly said. I mean, he was so kind, Jack, when the times that he did Fulhamish, and just an incredible wit as well. I thought he was
caustic. He was.
He was sharp as a tack, and I mean, what Dan's said there is such a lovely idea, and I think if we could do that and get more Fulham fans into the media and journalism and offer opportunities to people in our fan base who might not otherwise get that opportunity, I think that's a great way to remember Paddy if we can make that happen.
Yeah, 100%. We have to obviously look at the logistics, but I can't think of a better way to remember such a great man. And this is the thing, you said there, that he was always very kind, and I think that's the thing I remember. You go into these interviews and you speak to people, and sometimes you get players and things, and some people clam up, and that's not really been a thing for me. You go into those situations, you're like, oh, you just talk to them. The first time I've ever been like genuinely nervous ahead of a podcast was when we had Paddy Barclay on for the first time, and I was like,
I've been here many times, what's going on?
You make me nervous for different reasons. But there are, there's this kind of element, you go in and I'm like, oh, this is genuinely one of the people, one of my heroes. You grow up in this world, and I was always fascinated by journalism and writing and speaking and all of those things, by radio and doing this kind of life, I suppose. And the people that you look at early doors and the people you read, and I remember those columns that stick out, and you're like, that's what I want to do, that is what I want to do. And Paddy Barclay was always one of those people. And then that transition onto something like a Sunday supplement, which I used to watch on a Sunday morning on Sky Sports, and seeing him on there, and I was like, oh, you don't have to just write. You can talk, you can speak, you can, have opinions in these. And it kind of opened up a world of possibilities from where I was sitting as a youngster. And I think then to be speaking to someone like that, I was like, oh, I actually am nervous about this, because you're like, not only do I, want to impress, but there is a level of kind of idolization there that I don't necessarily have in the same way with something like a footballer, because I don't think I'm ever going to be a footballer. I'm definitely not this age. But like, you get to that point and you're like, okay, fine. So then to have been met by such kindness and such, a broad-minded view of everything, and then to have him obviously on the live show and to have plenty more discussions with him over the years that followed, it was a real joy. He remains a huge inspiration, someone that I really looked up to and will continue to look up to. And, what Dan says about a legacy and all of those different elements of what he leaves behind, I think the more we can do to kind of embellish exactly what he did and show that to people, it's got to be a good thing, because he was really a great man.
Yeah. All right. Well, rest in peace, Paddy. It's incredibly sad, and we're thinking of all of Paddy's family and friends at this time, and the fact that there were just so many tributes from across the footballing world, I think, showed just how incredibly highly thought of he was. And I think it was a real honour that Paddy loved Fulham more than anything else, and it just shows that we complain about Fulham and we moan about it, and there'll be some moans today, but I think what Paddy showed us is that we do actually support an incredibly beautiful football club, and the fact that he seeked it out as kind of a secondary fan. He'd been to all the football clubs and been to all the football grounds in the world, and the one that he actually thought, you know what, the one I love the most is Fulham and Craven Cottage. He did say that Norwich and Carrow Road was a close second, but Fulham just apparently edged out Carrow Road.
Everyone has their faults.
In England, Sammy, let's be absolutely clear.
No, of course, I know, but
Dundee and Dens would always, he always used to, and I'm sure he used this line, Fulhamish Live, I can't remember for the life of me.
If the two played in the Champions League final.
Yes, and it would be a nice problem to have. And he'd always chuckle. Never understand why people would laugh about that, because of course he'd then follow up with, well, Fulham won the Intertoto Cup final, and Fulham reached the Europa League final, and Dundee are back in the Premier League, and we're going really well. Look, it's lovely that he chose Craven Cottage, and I would just say to Siobhan and Duncan and Jennifer, we're thinking of you and all of Paddy's friends and family in the Johnny Haynes, and it felt like you could fill Craven Cottage several times over with people who were inspired by his words, and it's up to us now to take that forward, because he was a wordsmith. He was as garrulous as the man sitting to my left, but he was also as studious and cerebral as you are, Sammy, and he admired both of you. And it's very nice, actually, to be able to sit here and talk about the man that Paddy was and will always be remembered as being, because none of us in our right minds could ever realistically hope to have spent as much time with the number one. He was, Hugh McIlvenny maybe at the time that McIlvenny was writing, but there's no one else, and I was fortunate enough to spend some time with birthday boy Henry Winter yesterday, as I know many of us were yesterday. And Henry Winter was Paddy's work experience boy, and what a legacy that is, to have inflicted winter on the rest of us. But yeah, look, we've got to take that legacy forward, and you're absolutely right. How lovely that Craven Cottage was his venue of choice, and let's keep that going. Thank you for the opportunity to say how much he meant to me and how much he meant to the footballing community.
Yeah. Brilliantly said. And he talked about Fulham Dundee potentially in the Champions League. Well, if we see more performances like Saturday, maybe that might be. I don't know how Dundee are doing this season.
Not very well.
Oh, okay.
Move swiftly on.
Maybe one of those teams might be in next season's Champions League final if Saturday's anything to go by. Me and Jack...
Conference League final will do, thanks.
Yeah. Me and Jack discussed the Forest game at length in the maybe longest quick take that's ever been recorded. It was more of the long take, really, in the end, once Jack...
was it?
Yeah.
You know me.
Well, I'm still waiting for
I'll send you one, yeah.
elongated take that you haven't...
I will send you that.
I can't use it now. It's for the uninitiated, I delayed Mr. Collins prior to his long take with Sammy, which I found excellent, by recording an even longer take with Sammy down the Jack down the length of the Stevenage Road, and he said, "Oh, it's too big. I'll have to email it."
He can't. So, it won't send. The file's too big. That's how long Dan and I went.
Yeah, but this is always, you talked about wanting to go into journalism, and the key with you, Collins, is to be reliable and actually do the business. That's why
it's working out for me thus far.
Well, it's working out.
He's the talent. Don't ask him to email.
Well, this
stuff.
is it.
You can't be relying on him.
He's the pretty boy. Look at him. Look at him. This is
he's the number 10 of the operation.
This is why we've switched to video, isn't it?
Trequartista.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Look, but getting back to
Saturday
in Nottingham Forest. It was an excellent performance, and it had been. I think it's a long time coming. We've kind of flirted with sort of good halves here and there. But
it was the first 90 minutes, wasn't it?
It's the most complete performance of the season for me, 100%. Largely because of the calibre of the opposition we were playing against. I will bow to no one in my love of New Zealand's very own Chris Wood, because of my own family connections to Aratea, but even Chris Wood will admit that was a fairly shambolic goal. And at that point, I sort of thought, well, we've seen this movie many a time. But hey, presto, we came out and we played, and how it was only 2-1.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a combination of sort of Fulham being very generous and Matt Sells being magnificent. And I'm not really sure where you fall down on that, but that's the template now. As you said, we haven't won 3 league games in a row for quite a long time.
I think, and I might be wrong here, I think it's the season 2 years ago, 22-23, and I think it's that January-February period when we actually last won 3 league games in a row. I need to check that fact, but I'm pretty sure we didn't last year, and I know we haven't this year.
Yeah. And that's the test, really, because we haven't been good enough at home. We talked about this the last time I was on, and it didn't really get any better at home, despite our pleas for that to happen. And I would just say as well, the one thing that's changed, Mr. Collins, is that the Muniz sort of switcheroo that you so decried as not working the last time I was sat here has worked magnificently. I thought Jiminez had an outstanding game, and another target for your eye, Adama Traore, has been superb. And once again, poor old Nico Williams in that sort of battle of Fulham past versus Fulham present, he came in wearing a face protective mask and probably wanted to leave on a stretcher at half time. What Nuno was doing, playing him as an inverted left wing back,
I have no idea.
Especially as Nuno knows and should know better than anyone the link up between those two. But yeah, I mean, that's why I love Raul Jimenez. He didn't score. He could have had a hat trick of 3 very difficult chances in the first half. And yet we pushed on despite the game becoming tighter, and we didn't score enough goals, but we had enough grit to see it through. Sasha Lukic to the fore. I mean, he's the man of the match. I don't understand why anyone else is, but there we are.
No, I mean,
cat amongst pigeons here. Go on.
Adama has a shout, I think, for what he put together. But yeah, I would have given it to Sasha as well. I think Sasha is exceptional and has been pretty much for the entire season. Right, we haven't seen a particularly poor game from him when he's been on the pitch. Obviously that lengthy absence in the middle of the season, I think, is one of those things that potentially held us back from being further up in this table right now. Adama was exceptional, and I thought that. One, I have no idea what Nuno was doing. I'm completely with you. Like, if anyone understood what Adama Traore can bring to the table, it should have been Nuno Espirito Santo. But you kind of look at the way that they set up, and Dan Cook mentioned this before the quick take. Olaina is one of the very few players that we've seen, genuinely go up man for man against Adama and win that battle one-on-one. There are not many when Adama's on form who can stand up to him and actually do a job on him. And we've seen Olaina do it before. And so to play Nico Williams, it's not like one of them is a left back and one of them is a right back. You can switch them. They both play on both sides, right? So to do that made no sense whatsoever. Poor old Nico Williams, he must be still dizzy. But you kind of look at that and think, okay, so there was an opportunity there, and Adama took full advantage of it. And again, when he started games, Adama's looked really, really good. When he's come off the bench, he hasn't. And unfortunately, you have to kind of take that where it is at the moment, because we've seen, I think a lot of us were calling for Harry Wilson earlier in the season. Now, obviously, Wilson's injured, but a lot of us, after those cameo performances, were like, Wilson has to start. There has to be a space for Harry Wilson in this team. And, that played out. There were different elements to that. But actually, Harry Wilson's been the one who, as a super sub, has made more of an impact than Adama has, I think. And so I think it's worth just examining the fact that when he does start and when he's on that kind of form, there are a few players that can stand up to him. And I hope we see it again, obviously, at the weekend against Crystal Palace. I would say that I thought that Raul was excellent. I think Raul's been excellent for a while. Like, Raul has been exceptional in terms of what he's put in, not just on ball, but off it, in terms of his work rate, in terms of what he puts together. I think that there has been a level that we've seen where he's stepped up again this season. I will stand to a point with my point about the Muniz Raul switch. I didn't think Muniz was particularly good when he came on.
Going to do this again?
Literally the last time. I think that either of them, when they start, are good. I don't think either of them are a sub off the bench.
But isn't it a squad game now? Isn't the big thing when you look at where we are as a club and where we are with the first team squad, that you've got a genuine argument now over who starts in almost every position.
Yeah,
and I would actually say that, I know that Mr. Senor Jiminez, for instance, listened to the Fulham Tottenham thing that we did because I sent it to him. And I said, look, here's my mate from Acton, Mr. Collins, saying that, neither you or Rodri, both of you should take a seat and be replaced by Evan Ferguson. Because he's allegedly Irish, and this is perhaps one of the most ridiculous things I ever heard. And I let it go, because otherwise we'd talk for 3 hours instead of 1. And maybe you are the reason. Maybe you are responsible for the But the basic point about this is that you can use 7. You can name so many substitutes and use so many substitutes now. You can name 9, is it, and use 5? Or so previously, when we've been stretched in terms of injuries and suspensions, you've ended up with sort of people like people who now look really interesting players like Marshall, Goddo, and Josh King, and a couple of others as sort of bench fillers. Now it looks like, even with a couple of injuries, Kenny Tete is obviously a big miss. Timo's done well for the most part. Wilson, you meant Prince Harry, obviously a huge loss for us. There's the second most, he may have eclipsed the other Harold Wilson in my affections, if I might put it like that. But we genuinely now have a squad where there are options.
Yeah,
and that's a great place to be in. So the idea of like starters versus substitutes, we've got to get those players have now got to get into the mindset of how you contribute. It's up to the manager to select the team for the occasion, but we've also now got an ability to switch around, and I think that's well done to whoever's doing the recruitment, well done to Marco, but also well done to the players for getting themselves into a mindset where they can cope with being a starter 1 week and not playing for 3 weeks, and then still know that they're part of the fabric of a successful Fulham side.
I think one thing that, I don't know if this is by accident or by design, but I think this season, more than any, has proven that actually a lot of clubs in the Premier League have struggled to cope with injury crises because I think it's a fair argument to say that more clubs, more than 50% of the clubs, if you put everyone's starting 11, absolutely there's no injuries, Fulham are not in the top 10, just on paper in this league.
Okay, okay, fine. We're in that scrap for 10th. Let's put it that way.
But the starting 11, but
be ambitious, lads. Come on.
No.
Just as a point.
But then what I'm trying to say is whereas other clubs, they've had some injuries and then really struggled with who is next in line. Fulham have had good depth all season, and also because in some positions there is a fight for that spot. It's not like there's one superstar and then there is a person on the bench that isn't really fit to lace their boots. I think the only position where we have that forward is in goalkeeper.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But in every other position, we have a genuine fight for that, and I think Fulham are reaping the rewards on that. And look, do I think that the Muniz Jiminez thing is going to work for the very long term? I'm not 100% sure. I would still think in the summer that maybe there is a case for Fulham to go out and sign a top-class striker. However, this season, it has worked. The mixture of the two has performed brilliantly, but it's quite unconventional to have two strikers kind of filling in for each other and not to have a main man. That's not many clubs are doing that.
But Raul is the main man. Like if Raul wasn't
Muniz started the season.
He did, but right now Raul is the main man. And actually, I think if Raul didn't start on Saturday, I'll be disappointed. That's where I'm at with it.
But how many clubs?
His point is that and it's one that I agree with, which is that even if you're playing with one striker, to have two senior strikers, it risks a problem, doesn't it? Because if one of them gets injured, what are you going to do? Now, actually, I think this is a testament to Marco Silva's man management. because most people, people have been very rude about Rodrigo Muniz, not just on this podcast, but
very rude about Rodrigo Muniz.
Well, I mean, roll the tape.
I just don't think he's particularly effective off the bench.
Well, but you've also suggested in the past that. Not just you, but I'm talking about, let's broaden it wider than just Jack, right? There is an honest debate over the period that Rodri's been at the club about whether he could go to the next level. It was a big thing to bring him in from South American football after essentially one full
And there's been a lot of chat this season about whether last season was just a fluke.
And also how long Raul Jimenez, for instance, can produce the levels that Jack has.
Which I think is a reasonable question.
And no, they're all reasonable questions. I'm just concerned at some of the answers that have been put out there, right? Because the actual answer is both of them are top-level bona fide Premier League footballers. You can't argue with that. The question is, Marco Silva's an ambitious manager. He wants to get Fulham to play in Europe regularly. He believes he has unfinished business at the top table of European football, right? And he wants to do it here. Aren't we lucky to take the theme of the podcast so far? We're lucky to have a man of Marco Silva's calibre managing this football club. Well, does Marco Silva not deserve a third option off the bench? And how long can he do it with almost a 34-year-old who's come back from a serious head injury and is still sticking his head into places where you wouldn't see me dead? Trying to do that. And Rodrigo is somebody who's come on massively, leaps and bounds. What you've said, which is fair enough, and there's not much you say that's fair enough, Jack, but what you said is, I don't mean it, by the way. I know. It's just the ongoing, we've nagged at each other since we were schoolboys, so why not just keep it going? What he said, which is fair enough, is sometimes Rodrigo needs to work on the off the ball, the movement, the hold-up play, but I think it's all there. The question is, to get to the next level, you need a genuine 20-goal a season centre forward, and in the system that Silva plays, you've got to have questions about how sharp Jimenez is going to be in a season from now, and you've got to, is Rodrigo going to be able to go to that level, and is it reasonable to expect him to do that from start of August? Or do we need to look at, and also, as I said last time I was on, do we need to look at a different profile of striker to give yourself an option? Because sometimes, they're similar types of players, although Jimenez is superb in the air, and Rodrigo scored a few headers. I mean, Emile Smith-Rowe started scoring headers now.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about.
But the point is a fair one, but it's a challenge that you said about goalkeeper. I mean, I don't mean to be rude about Stephen Bender, but sometimes it looks like he won a competition to be in goal from amongst the citizens of the Hammersmith.
You're not going to find any arguments.
You are going to, if God forbid something happened to Bernd Leno, and hopefully that's not going to happen, and he couldn't have done anything about the beautiful goal at Wigan scored by Johnny Smith.
A lot of the goals he conceded, he couldn't actually have done anything about.
The Finn Azaz goal as well.
The penalties at Preston.
Not Finn Azaz. Vata.
Yes. The penalties at Preston, he didn't really get near many of them. And that was kind of my test of although Leno doesn't save many penalties.
No, but it wasn't that he didn't get near any of them, it was that they seemed to go through him. That was my real concern.
It was also that it looks like the goal was 2 times as big. Look, we did Bender at length after Wigan. I do not want to go down that little rabbit hole again. But I think it's very interesting the situation that Marco's got. He's got a lot of options. He's got a lot of depth, and it is that you see this season how many clubs have had injury crises, and that's testament to Fulham's medical department for one, but also sometimes you've seen certain squads and even teams that you think should be better equipped actually not have that much behind the front 11. United, West Ham United, Tottenham,
Manchester City, Spurs.
Yeah, Spurs. I mean, there's been so many examples of teams that really have struggled with their injury crises. And whilst Fulham would also struggle with an injury crisis the size of Tottenham's, don't get me wrong, and theirs is exacerbated by playing European football, but I think has been interesting to see that in most positions, not every position, Fulham are well covered, and also there is competition. And we've seen that someone like Rodrigo Muniz thrives off having some competition. His best work has been when there's been someone kind of, either whether it's Armando Broja or Raul Jimenez. And you say he wasn't very good on Saturday. I thought he came on Saturday. I mean, he came on Saturday like a train. He looked determined to make a mark on the game. He looked like he had real fire in his belly.
Stormed down the tunnel after the pit. Again, did you see this?
Yeah, something happened, didn't it? I don't know what it was.
I don't know what it was, but everyone else came up to the Hammersmith end to applaud, and he went rocketing down the tunnel and ignored the whole Johnny Haynes.
But he was also like towards the end of the game, like geeing up the crowd and all of that. It didn't strike me of a man that was that unhappy. Maybe he just, I don't know.
No. I don't know what happened. I imagine something went off, but I don't know what it was.
Something was said, wasn't it?
You might need the bathroom.
I don't speak Portuguese.
He needed the bathroom. Right, okay.
On that note, we will take a break and look ahead to Palace on Saturday. Part 2 of the Fulhamish podcast. It is Sammy here with Dan Crawford and Jack Collins. If you're heading to the Palace game on Saturday, do pop into Craft Beer Co. at Hammersmith Broadway, either on your way to the game or on your way back from the game. A beautiful family-run pub with a wide selection of beers from all across the country and across the world. It is an absolutely beautiful setting and the perfect place to start your little jaunt down from Hammersmith towards the Cottage. Let's look ahead then to the game on Saturday against Crystal Palace. Another 3 p.m. Saturday. It was nice for that to return. I actually hadn't realised until the day of the game, the last 3 p.m. Saturday before Nottingham Forest. Any quick ideas? The last Saturday,
Wolves?
3 p.m. Yeah. Wolves after the international break. It'd been an awful long time since we had one. And then two come along at once. There's a phrase for that, isn't there? Palace, I don't know what to make of Palace. Obviously, the game that we had against them early this season, Jack, it was a very comfortable day out. You and I were both there. One of us was in a better state than the other from memory.
You were rough.
Oh, it's not how I quite remember it. Saw you just outside the away end. I was like, "Are you okay, mate?"
I was not okay.
I think you were lying down when I saw you.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it was a big weekend. I was going to see Kneecap the night before, so things have spiralled quite heavily out of control.
Obviously,
but anyway, it was
a very different Crystal Palace that day. That day was weird because they'd had.
Why are you asking him? He don't remember.
Well, no, yeah. I do, and I've watched it back.
It was such a weird day because they had such an injury crisis. They had Justin Devaney making his debut that day, who's gone on actually to become quite a key player for them this season. But at the time, the Palace fans in the pub I was with had never heard of Justin Devaney. It was that much of a kind of like scraping the barrel for them. But since that day, actually, they've been on pretty good form. They've lost 4 times in that period. And we're talking a period of about 12, 13 matches since then.
Yeah.
They've obviously been fantastic as well away from home, which is obviously a concern for us. They keep winning and keeping clean sheets away from home, which is obviously something that we'd like to break the trend of on Saturday. Yeah,
I mean, look, I think you have to take away from that game, at Selhurst Park, it's a completely different side almost in terms of the depth they have available, the players they have available, and the way that they're going about their business. And also, people will look at it and go, well, they lost to Everton last week. They shouldn't have lost to Everton last week. I'm not sure how they ended up losing that game. Some defensive mishaps, sure, but also they created a host of chances. I think it was the only game in the whole Premier League that actually the XG went the other way of what the actual result was. So take that with a pinch of salt, the fact that they lost to Everton last week. And Everton just feel like they're on a kind of mystery run at the moment under David Moyes anyway. So you just got to keep rolling with those punches. But I think this is a really, really tricky fixture. And to be honest, I'm quite pleased that I'm saying that because it's been the games where I've gone, this is going to be tricky, Newcastle, this is going to be tricky, Nottingham Forest, that Fulham have actually turned up and really put everything into. And so I think the fact that this is a Palace side in good form with a good run of results who aren't too far behind us in terms of places in the table, but far enough behind that, you're not necessarily worried about them catching up. This offers a real opportunity. And I think that, whilst we can talk about Palace all we like, because we know what they're going to be, we know that they're going to set up under Glasner in that 5 at the back system, we know that they are going to run incredibly hard, we know that they're going to try and work the ball down the flanks and get the ball into Mateta, who has been phenomenal. Since sort of about 6 months after he arrived at Palace, he suddenly got the scoring bug, and he hasn't really stopped since. So you can kind of think about that, but I'll kind of flip it to the Fulham element of it and say, if Fulham play like we did against Nottingham Forest, we'll win this game. Like, I don't think that there are too many sides, exclude the very, very top of the table, that against Fulham in that kind of form at home, with the place, really, really buzzing for it, that will be able to stand against what Fulham did. Now, whether we can raise our level to play like that again, there's one thing playing against the Forest side, who, one, we have a bit of a number on, just as a kind of weird thing going on, but two, that we were looking at them and thinking, hang on, they're up there, they come up with us. We can raise our game for this. And I think we did it we've done it with a couple of teams this season. Letting the guard down here is a major, major no-no. If Fulham let our guard down against this Palace side, we will lose this game. And so it comes to a point of, how do you go out and address this? How do you play and kind of repeat what you did last week? Can you contain them in the middle and start to impose your own game upon them? Can Sasha Lukic and Sander Berger do what they did last week again? If all of those things come out as yeses, I think we win this game. If we don't, then I think that this is a potential banana skin. And it's a shame, because winning this and then potentially the one after, if Fulham were to win the next 2 games, I think we're right in the European conversation. I know we got an email about using the word conversation, but I'm gonna keep doing it. No, we did. We got an email being like, stop using the word conversation in the European picture, whatever. But it kind of looks at this, and I think that if we were to go and beat Palace and then Wolves, that is a statement of intent. And it comes into, then there's a bit of a tricky run for Fulham. It gives you a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of breathing space. And that's really important. If we're going to get there and we're going to push, and we're not going to go to the beach like we did last year in March, then I think that this is a really opportune moment to take advantage of the teams around us floundering a bit. We know that there's a couple of tricky games in there this weekend. I think Chelsea are playing Villa. So, there's that kind of teams around and about us. Can we draw within a point of Chelsea if they lose to Villa? Like, if Villa win that game, they're going to still be hot on our heels. Yeah. Like, there's a lot going on there that I think Fulham can take advantage of. And Newcastle, who are only a couple of points ahead as well, play Liverpool. So I think that we should be looking at this as an opportunity to potentially move up the table and to cement ourselves in the picture for European qualification.
Dan, are you ready for the Maxime Lacroix versus Joachim Andersen narrative to kick off again? This is a weird one that I think Palace and Fulham fans are trying to win the moral argument. Is it a moral argument? I don't know, of who got the better deal here. Obviously, Fulham paid a lot of money for Joachim Andersen. Palace were quite happy to get quite a lot of money. They think that they signed well with Maxime Lacroix.
They did sign well with Maxime Lacroix.
But then again, Maxime Lacroix had a bit of a stinker against Fulham. It's just been a bit of an on-running little thing with Crystal Palace. Generally, I feel like the Fulham Palace, there is no rivalry. Let's not even get that out there. But obviously with Palace over the years as well, there's the whole we're the oldest club in London.
I can do 10 minutes on that load of nonsense.
Well, if you've got maybe
don't even give it credence, Daniel.
Well, this is look. I'd say this. I wouldn't give any of these things credence. People who want to whip up a rivalry can try and do that. I mean, what I'm more interested in is, can Joachim Andersen do the job on Jean-Paul Mateta that he did at Selhurst Park?
Well, I don't know. Mateta did give Andersen quite a lot of concern that day.
No, I think we gave Mateta some early opportunities, both Andersen and, was it Bassi that day?
Yeah.
Well, Bassi, maybe he was at the same gig as Jack the night before. I don't know. He likes that sort of music, allegedly.
He's really into Irish rap, Calvin Bassi.
Yeah, it was a joke.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't. But the point being that we were defensively rather ropey for about 20 minutes. And after that, when we sort of figured out the parameters of the pitch and Andersen remembered who was, that he wasn't playing in a blue and red shirt, we were fine. Now, I think, and actually, it is a London derby. Let's not. One of the really interesting things with the Marco Silva reign is that we've got progressively much better at playing our neighbours.
So much better. I think
this is the
West
best.
Ham defeat is the only one in about 12, 13, a long time.
And we certainly contributed to our own downfall on that evening in the stadium that should still be an athletics track. I would just remind everybody of that. It is the Olympic Stadium, whatever Paul Pescasolido's wife might think about it. Now. And Palace are not the oldest team in London. Let's just be clear about that. It's very clear. Now, let's actually focus on the football here, because Jack's absolutely right. Although I worry that by thinking about things that are out of our control, who's going to beat other teams, the European, should we dust off the passports? Are we really in the debate, in the chase? What you've got to do is take all of that out of it, guys, and just win. Just produce a level of performance, because you said raise our level. Just maintain the level.
Yeah.
Just play in a way that this team can play and build up some points and earn the right to be comfortable about 60. I'd love to, be sitting there with 20 minutes to go, not, 3 or 4 goals up. I don't remember the last time, Fulham I do. It was against Nottingham Forest a few years ago, and then it was against West Ham. We dished out some beatings, and I think this team is good enough to dish out some beatings. Now, the problem is Palace are quite good. They're probably too low in the table because, if we want to call this, it's the Roy Hodgson, Ray Lewington, whatever it is type derby, a genuine meeting of two clubs that have had to fight for their futures and re-establish themselves at this level, and both teams try and play football in the right way. The interesting one, I talked about Adama Traore earlier, who are Palace going to play at left wing back? Is it going to be Tyrick Mitchell, who has a history of getting sent off against Fulham, or is it going to be Ben Chilwell, who has a history of getting roasted by Fulham right wingers, including Floyd Aite?
I really hope it's Ben Chilwell.
Well, look, I'd like either one of them. I'd fancy Adama Traore or even Alex Iwobi. The beauty of this is how Palace are going to play. They're probably going to play with Will Hughes and Jefferson Lerma as the two holding midfielders. Will Hughes, one of the most underappreciated
wonderful footballer,
central midfielders since he all burst onto our consciousness in Championship Manager or whatever it's called these days as a 16-year-old, and did really well for Derby. Really, somebody Roy Hodgson tried to sign for us and was unsuccessful, and then they got him at Palace. And then you're going to have Ismail Assar and Abir Eze behind Mateta. Can Berger and Lukic stop the Palace midfield from getting the supply into Mateta? And can we defend as well as we did last week whilst putting Palace on the back foot? The answer to all those questions is yes. The result is going to be in our hands in terms of whether we can play, and that's the only thing that matters. Get the points on the board, and then we can see, how far up the table we finish. Because I think it's dangerous to go, it's an easy get. It's a potential opportunity against Palace. It's not what you said, but it's also, and we've got Wolves. No. All of these teams can beat us.
Well, we know
very easily, and we can beat ourselves. So it's about
the thing
our
for
own
Fulham
level.
has to be not looking too much, especially as when you're fighting for 8th as well. It's quite a weird position. If it's the title, you can be a bit like, okay, well, clearly I don't want Arsenal to win or something like that.
Yeah, but it's kind of weird who you want to beat who in the other games, right? Yeah,
I think realistic, and it's a little bit. This is a bit similar when you're fighting for the playoffs in the Championship. It gets quite hard and muddy to really work out who needs to beat who. Ultimately, historically, you've needed between about 55 and 60 points to finish 8th. Right, Fulham are on 39 from 24. Ultimately, we need to keep up a roughly 1.5 points a game tally, and we're there. So that's what Fulham, I think you're totally right, Dan, is Fulham need to think about, here's a points target. If you get to 60 points, you're going to be in and around the conversation. You're going to be incredibly unlucky to reach 60 points and not qualify for Europe. And therefore, whether you finish 7th, whether you finish 8th, it's not, you brought up the point when we chatted the other day that 8th is not 100% going to be...
No, it's not guaranteed. It depends if the team in the top 8, where top 7 wins the FA Cup.
Yeah.
Well, if we win
the FA Cup.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many, and the way it's going at the moment, Newcastle could win the Carabao and not finish, and then finish outside the European places is not unthinkable unthinkable considering the form they're on. So I think Fulham just need to focus on, here's a points target, get here and we'll be pretty good. And that's why I think Marco literally will be taking it game by game. He might be thinking slightly about the bigger picture, but his players will be solely focused on Saturday. Just before we come on to anything else, a little bit of trivia. When did Fulham last beat Crystal Palace at Craven Cottage?
Ooh. A long time ago. It's probably
Division 1, probably. I'm trying to think. Not in the
there is one in the Premier League. It is in the Premier League.
Not in the last 3 seasons.
No.
No, it'll be not in the season we went down. Oh, we drew in the season we went down.
Yeah, we did.
Last day of the season.
Yeah, no, that was Chris David.
Chris David
with that
scored a worldie.
Yeah. So when would we have beaten Palace? Was it in the? They weren't in the league when we
2011.
stayed up in the Great Escape.
2005.
Yeah.
Wow. Who scored?
I know. Well, I know that Andy Johnson scored for them.
He's not looking on the Hammy End websites. He's not looking in the Hammy End archive. I've got to plug it. Come on, lads. Go in the Hammy End archive.
2005. What was the score?
Consider.
It was 3-1 to Fulham.
Go on. Stick it in the Hammy End. Come up with it.
Andy Cole's brace ensured Fulham won this lively London relegation derby.
Call me Andrew, I think you'll find. And Thomas Radzinski.
Thomas Radzinski in the 73rd. And yeah, Andy Johnson equalised for
with a penalty after an atrocious dive at the Putney end, as I seem to recall.
Yes. So yeah, there's been an awfully... so we're talking, that was...
20 years ago.
20 years since a win at the Cottage over Palace. That's overdue.
That's overdue. We're due a win against Palace. There we go.
Let's do some emails and any other business. First of all, we have an update from Fulhamish. Email titled Crazy Stats. Now, Fulhamish gave us the breakdown of Fulham's Robin Hood tendencies.
Oh, yes.
And he's written us back to basically say that the stats are only getting worse.
Yeah, no, I know. I feel it. Every game we play, I feel it.
Hi, Sammy. The trend of us getting a high amount of points against the better teams and a low amount of points against the worst teams in the Prem isn't just continuing after 25 games, it is increasing. Our points per game against the bottom 8 is 0.92. Our points per game against the 11 other teams above them is more than double, 1.93. Our record against the 7 clubs above us is slightly lower at 1.8 points per game, but that is still about double. This is seriously crazy. If we record against the bottom teams, if our record against the bottom teams was equal, our average over the whole league, it would be very odd, but double of that is just nuts. He then asks...
Where are Palace? Are Palace 12th or 13th? If Palace are 13th, we're so screwed. If Palace are 12th, we're fine.
I'm now finding out Palace are 13th.
Rather write it off. We're going to lose 1-0.
Yeah, I love coming on this podcast because people give you really obscure statistical information, and that's I don't even want to go to the game on Saturday now, Jack.
I'm going to sit in the Duke of Cornwall and drink Murphy's.
Yeah, other pubs are available, I guess we have to say, but I drink there too. You know where to avoid it anyway.
Exactly. If you avoid me and Dan, then you avoid the Duke.
Right, this next one from Neil Stewart. I'll come to you on this one, Dan. Neil says, I'm coming to you because you mentioned something about this earlier, and I didn't know if it was just hope or expectation. Neil says, I'm becoming increasingly concerned about Silva leaving the club. Are Fulham's chances of keeping him improved by getting into Europe or missing out? I could argue for both, because if we miss out, he might be in less demand by bigger clubs. I see what he's saying there. I think if Fulham get into Europe, then suddenly it's like, we want Silva. But obviously...
like a medieval horde.
Yeah. If we miss out, maybe... Silva's thinking,
give us the Silva.
I see.
If we miss out, then maybe Silva will go like, what's left for me to achieve at Fulham? There were some more links. They felt like slightly lazy links to Spurs the other day.
Lazy links, yeah.
It is the one that will rumble on and on. I am also a Spurs fan, just for the pure fact of I want Ange Postecoglou to keep his job. I don't know. I'm semi-concerned about it, but I do think maybe there is another season. And I didn't think that at the beginning of that campaign, where I said quite firmly that I think this is his last season at Fulham.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'm very surprised, frankly. Look, what I would say is I think it's astonishing, and I think we talked about this the last time I was here, it's astonishing that top clubs around the world haven't cottoned on to the fact that Marco Silva is one of the finest managers in world football. You know, just in terms of playing attractive football. You talked about Postecoglou. I mean, you know, Postecoglou has a particular purist's view of football, which I share. But even I wouldn't go sort of full out Ange. Even on, you know, even if we had a version of Football Manager to play this season, I wouldn't.
I'd go full Ange.
Yeah, well, well, you just save it and restart, wouldn't you? Know what you're like, Collins. But addressing the I assume it's a gentleman. Sorry, Neil's point. I wouldn't be overly worried about this, simply because there are no vacancies where he would walk into, and he thinks Silva's an honourable man. You know, he has learnt from the fact that he may have flirted a little too rapaciously with Everton when he was at Vicarage Road, and he does value the fact that Fulham gave him an opportunity and they've backed him, and he does. You know, he flies out of Heathrow after every home game, and he's often pursued by many delighted Fulham fans, including a friend of mine who met him last weekend. The key thing about this is Fulham need to show progress, right? We do need to get into Europe eventually, or he will look for opportunities elsewhere. But it's married with two things. One, we need to be progressing on the pitch, but also the ownership of the football club need to back him in a way that they started to do, I think, this season with the Emile Smith-Rowe signing. That felt big for me. And splashing the cash on Sander Berge, that also felt like a big moment. And I would just say we're in a better position on PSR than people might realise, simply because of the Stansfield money that people forget about. Now, I wouldn't be overly worried, because where's he going to go to? Okay, the links that you talked about Tottenham, he's not going to want to work for Daniel Levy.
I also think that Spurs are just not going to pay his buyout clause. Like, Levy just doesn't do that. It's not his style. If Spurs are going to go anywhere, I think they're going to go to Bournemouth and look at Andoni Iraola, which might be for better or for worse.
To do that as well.
100% for better or for worse. But I think that's where the eye of Mordor is now. So,
but even the eye of Mordor, blimey. I mean, some of Jack's as a historian, some of Jack's references are sort of.
Well, that's not history; it's fantasy.
Well, yeah, I was going to say I don't. When did that happen?
That was kind of my point, lads. Some of this is really interesting to me, because the jobs that Silva would want a Champions League job. If a Champions League job came around with a club that were threatening for a title, but they're just not there, and he's managed all over Europe. I don't think he's going to leave. He loves being in Britain. He wants to prove himself in the Premier League.
Yeah.
And that's going to entitle. That's going to mean that he will move to a club that has a genuine chance of winning things. And he has always said he wants to make history at Fulham. So he's challenged the players, to your earlier point, to beat the record points total. He wants to win trophies. That's why he takes the FA Cup so seriously. And that'll be very interesting in a couple of weeks when we go to Manchester United, because he's got to score. All the players have got to score to settle on that pitch in that competition. I don't want to be blasé about it, because if other Premier League clubs are looking, this is where they should look. But at the moment, he's happy, and we're making progress. If we stall and he doesn't get the autonomy over transfer policy and the ability to sign the players that he wants this summer, then we might see a little more movement, but I don't see it at the moment, and I'd be more concerned about picking up the points. You know, Marco loves Fulham. Look, the players love Marco. They love to play for him, and he's got Fulham's ownership, frankly, where he needs them. You know, these utterances about we need to have fans in the ground, we need to have a better atmosphere. You know, he's a very shrewd operator in the 7 languages that he speaks, you know, to make his points very clearly to every aspect of the Fulham fan base and community, whether that's the people who directly employ him, the board of Fulham Football Club, all the fans, all the media. You know, he's an astute operator, and you know, I'm proud of the manager of our football club and the progress that he's making, and he's still going to be proving people wrong. You know, let's be glad actually that he's under the radar and not mentioned enough in terms of the job that he's doing.
Yeah. Next one from Richard Smith, looking at the Manchester United ticket pricing. Richard has done some sums on basically how much Fulham will make from the trip to Old Trafford and how much it would cost to subsidise the tickets as... well, I suggested on Twitter, and then the Fulham Supporters Trust then
was later
it that way
around,
suggested.
Okay,
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
But, you know, it didn't take a genius to think of it. So Richard basically has done some sums that Fulham will make, in his eyes, about £1.2 million out of the trip to Manchester United based on the prices within the stadium. And therefore, if Fulham actually subsidised a 4,000 allocation down to £30, Fulham would still make 1.12 in ticket money before TV money is taken into account. Richard asks, you know, do you think Fulham will do the right thing and subsidise those travelling fans, even if it was just credit on a ticketing account that you'd be guaranteed to spend with you? What's not to like? As things stand, Fulham have not decided to subsidise the tickets. Part of me thinks that if they haven't by now,
Wow, I'm stunned.
they're not going to. I mean, look, you're looking at this. You got 2 weeks' notice effectively to get to Manchester by the time that the 4:30 kickoff was announced,
Confirmed,
and with a 4:30 kickoff, trying to account for the fact that there could be extra time and penalties as well. Even just making the final train back to London is pretty impossible. You'd have to take a risk, and it doesn't go to extra time effectively in order to make that final train. When you then add all of the expense of the trip to Manchester, plus that £50 to £65 ticket that they're charging, Dan, I am just very concerned that for what is such a massive match, Fulham have taken the allocation of 3,000. I mean, Fulham could take an allocation of 9,000 if they wanted to, but they never would. But I think this is a massive missed opportunity that Fulham wouldn't consider the subsidising. It's in our own interests and would literally just be a small amount out of the unexpected profits. I find it crazy personally that they wouldn't consider this. And by the way, there is previous to this, because both Derby and Reading in the past have subsidised their own supporters in contrast to Manchester United's ticket prices. And we've got to say, by the way, there was kind of a bit of confusion, because I think it used to be the case that home teams and away teams jointly decided the prices for FA Cup matches. That is no longer the case. It is purely the home team that picks the prices.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the Supporters Trust board, so it's not a surprise to anybody what I think about this. In fact, the three of us have been unanimous for a long, long time about, and it's got to be set in the broader context of price gouging, which is what this is. I think it's very sad, actually, that the FA allows their competition to be treated in such a manner. The pricing is ridiculous. It's actually cheaper to watch this game than it would have been to watch Manchester United against Leicester in the previous round. And you have to relate this specifically to Jim Ratcliffe's comments as when Ineos went into Manchester United, and he said, been quoted earlier this season as the price increases that he's levied on matchday tickets for members at Old Trafford are justifiable, because there's no way that Manchester United, quote, should have less expensive tickets than Fulham, right? And this is why the FA Cup tickets, and we've argued this, and we had a motion that went to FA Council to try and tidy this up, proposed by our friend Tom Greatrix, the former chair of the Supporters Trust, and now the chair of the Football Supporters Association, the national body, to tidy up this thing of like, we finally got a price cap in the Premier League after 15 years of campaigning, right? Now, Fulham will not subsidise these tickets. They won't even subsidise the coach travel, which was something previous hierarchies did, whatever the faults of the Mohammed Al Fayed regime, and there were many, and we're still finding out precisely what those were. But they won't do it.
No, of course they won't.
They won't. They've been quite clear and categorical that not only do they believe in their stretch pricing model, that they also believe that the decisions around away ticketing sales and how those tickets were sold for the game at Stamford Bridge on Boxing Day, and even for Brighton, which went on sale earlier this week, they think those are the right things to do, because it means that people who don't normally go to an away game are able to go to an away game, and that's fine. Mr. McIntosh can believe that. I've known Mr. McIntosh for a long time, and he was previously chief executive of the other club in Manchester, where he didn't subscribe to these views. They had to fill First Main Road and then the stadium, just for the sake of consistency, the City of Manchester Stadium, which was also meant to be an athletics track and ended up in the lap of a Premier League club. It's really interesting how often that happens when we stage a major athletics competition in this country. But Mr. McIntosh can believe that it's great that we can have a sort of switcheroo on away tickets and have people going to. But when you're sat next to or stood next to a home fan in an away area and they celebrate the goal that their team has scored next to you, as happens frequently at these grounds, you have a different idea of what is fair and right. And for a game like that, and you've already referenced, you've also got an Avanti or a potential Avanti train strike that might be averted, that may not. The families and people who want to go and attend, Fulham's next task in reaching the FA Cup final 50 years on from the only time that the Whites ever made it to an FA Cup final, are going to find it very difficult, and we need as much support in that stadium as possible, because we aren't going to get any support from the referee, whether it's Chris Kavanagh or otherwise any of the other Greater Manchester refereeing fraternity who will be lined up to referee that fixture. It'll be on the television, and it will, unfortunately, with apologies to my friends from the Manchester United Supporters Trust, be all about Manchester United. This is very simply what it's always been, which is, as long-term fans of Fulham Football Club, as fans of a similar generation, all four of us, we know that when Fulham don't do well or are struggling, or you can't get access to tickets, those young supporters will go elsewhere and support other teams. Now, we're Fulham fans, we're mugs. I have bought a ticket for this game. I feel very conflicted about it. But I like Manchester. I also want to go and watch Fulham. I can't abide listening to some ill-informed commentator tell me what's going on with my club. I want to be there and watch and see if Alex Iwobi and Calvin Bassey can do something again, or somebody else. Wouldn't it be nice if Josh King sort of stormed through the middle and stuck it away in the 89th minute, or Ryan Sess, or somebody like that, to create more memories on what's already been a really good FA Cup run for Fulham. This is absolutely the wrong thing for Fulham to do, but you had it right. It's Manchester United's pricing, but Fulham will agree with it because it allows them and it allows Mr. McIntosh and the other Premier League suits to sit together and say, well, there's precedent for, actually our pricing is affordable in comparison to other, and you've got the London tax that they always bring out, or, it's comparable to going to watch Taylor Swift, as someone from the Premier League briefed to the papers at the start of the season, or, a theatre or a test match or any of these things. Now, in respect of cricket, an England batting collapse might mean you only get to watch 90 minutes of a test match. But, in general, these are things that should be priced affordably, because otherwise you lose out. But actually, clubs are not interested. You pointed out the main money that Fulham are going to get is broadcasting. match ticketing and all of these things are pocket change to people like Shad Khan and to people like the Glazers. And it's not just a Fulham problem, it's a football problem, but these two clubs are amongst the worst exponents of it. And it's really unfortunate that a big game is going to be played out in front of a smaller away support than could otherwise be. Some of that is the scheduling, some of that is the decision to play the game at the time that it is, and the sort of ridiculousness of travel options at this point in time. But a lot of it is also down to how the game is marketed, priced, and how fans are treated. Match-going fans seem to be right down at the bottom of the priority list.
Yeah, they are. They are. I mean, look, in the words of Mikel Arteta, it's an absolute disgrace.
It used to, though, it felt like the football club would care that actually there's lots of Fulham fans there. And now it seems to be this attitude of, I don't get paid anymore at the end of the week. It doesn't benefit us, Fulham. We don't get any extra prize that actually 6,000 Fulham fans were able to attend the game.
That's such short-sighted thinking.
I know, but it's so annoying.
If you have a fan, look, Marco Silva has spoken at length, right? And I think you probably give him the final word on this, right? Like, Marco Silva has spoken at length about how an atmosphere and fans in the stadium and these things all benefit the team, right? So, like, if you're looking at it, and let's just try and put ourselves in the club's shoes for a second, it's weird, but let's just say from a financial perspective, what's the best thing that can happen here from a Fulham perspective? Well, just get into the next round, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because then you get this again, right? Like, the windfalls that come through this, the best chance you have of getting to the next round is by having a support there that are going to be vociferous and back the team to the nth degree. How do you do that? You help them get there. You help them get back. You help them with the ticket prices. And that seems to have just been lost in the ether somewhere with this regime and the board and the suits up top, because unfortunately that is the way, as Dan very rightly points out, that football is going, and Fulham seem to be the club. United are bad proponents, as points out, but Fulham seem to be the club that just care the least in terms of.
But it's also, Jack, so forgive me for interrupting you. I will put myself in the club's shoes because I find myself in this position regularly. Speaking with members of the board and other club officials, and I respect that they do say that Mr. Khan has put in an extraordinary amount of money, and he has. Right? There's no, people must be mad to invest in football clubs to the extent that they do. And Mr. Khan has, to his great credit, invested a lot of his own money in Fulham Football Club and put a lot of money into a stand that is finally getting to the point of being built. But I want to finish the point, because I'm not a stooge for Fulham Football Club, and I'd just like to say directly down the camera to everyone who sends me a message of you're Macintosh's best mate, or you're in favour of these things, and you just like the tea and coffee at Moss Pub. Well, we don't get any of that anymore. And I'll ask the tough questions of anybody, even these two, right? But they say that we need to raise revenue to earn back the money and to move into a new era and to make things sustainable. Well, you're never going to be sustainable in this benefactor model. The benefactor model depends on a benevolent person investing huge amounts of money, right? So what it comes down to is, what about involving the fans in raising revenue? What about talking to the fans about what it is they want in the Riverside stand? What about selling more things in the shop that fans would buy? And what about talking to the fans as adults about, here are the margins, here is what we can do, here is what we can't do. I'm not saying we should have a referendum on ticket pricing, and there are going to be times when you are going to have to pay out a little bit more. Every Fulham fan recognises that. But when it becomes a rich man's plaything, and when it becomes more difficult, I'm talking about people who want to take their kids to this game. I don't have children, but a lot of people do, right? And it's one of the privileges or the worst things you can pass on to your son or daughter following Fulham up and down the country. Mm-hmm. It either prepares you for every hardship you'll ever face in life, and you'll be quite stoical about it, or it's the most wonderful thing, And I happen to subscribe to the latter, and I would do, wouldn't I? But the point is, you either treat fans like adults, or you're just about the money. And I'd hate to think that our football club is simply now just going to accept cash from whoever puts it on the table. But we've seen with Titan capital markets. We've seen with their penchant for gambling sponsorship. We've seen with a number of things that might be the direction that they're going. But I appeal to the club's ownership and to the board and to the many number of good people who work at Fulham Football Club to think about the corporate social responsibility that they hold as custodians, as Mr. Khan said, of Craven Cottage and Fulham Football Club, and think about the future generations and not pricing them out. Because unfortunately, if they continue to take these decisions, then the fan groups will have to raise our voices against the football club in a way that we don't want to do. We want to support our team. We want other people to have the opportunity to support our team, or we'll have a situation where, as with last season, the people who can afford to support the team will protest in solidarity with the people who can't afford to go to the matches. And nobody should be deprived the right of watching this fantastic footballing side on account of having to pay a little bit more so that it makes a line in a spreadsheet add up.
Yeah. I just think I wanted to say is, you mentioned that, Shahid Khan has invested a lot in this football club, right? And that's, fair enough. He has. But what would be the crowning legacy of Shahid Khan's investment, right? Would it be winning a cup? Would winning the FA Cup probably make a lot of the pain and the sacrifice and the money he's given? Wouldn't that be an unbelievable legacy for Shahid Khan? Shahid Khan was the person that came in and won Fulham their first ever major trophy. He would go down, forget whatever happened, that would always be something.
For sure.
For sure,
but
and we've talked about here as well, Marcus Silva has said that support helps the team. He wants more support for this team with louder fans, more vocal fans and everything else. And so I'm just looking at this as pure logic, right? If you spend a tiny amount of your profits. This isn't even the club having to dig into their pocket. This is unexpected profit. You give out a little bit more, and actually maybe we could have aimed a bit more for the sky. We could have actually increased the allocation. If Fulham
Sammy, don't get me wrong. I completely agree with you.
No, sorry, but I'm just making a point.
What I'm saying is, and it's the challenge we get. You talk about the profit. They're not making a profit at the moment. Right, they're making operating losses.
Sure, but also, if you invest in a football club and you don't think you think you're making a return on investment, then you're an idiot.
Absolutely, but the challenge that we get as supporter representatives, and I get, is about, because we could take 9,000 screaming lunatics like me to Old Trafford, and we might not win, right? And that is how the business side looks at it.
It's a gamble, right?
But Marcus Silva looks at it that way.
Oh, well, no. Let me restate it again, just in case anyone think. I agree with you, right? But the challenge that we get from the suits, as Jack calls them, the bean counters, I think is a better terminology to description for this, is that somebody is looking at purely the bottom line, right? And I would just say to them, as Jack was just about to say before I rudely interrupted him, as we do in Acton, that they are not looking at it in that longer term view that we as fans do. And I think what I would say here is join the Supporters Trust, right? That gives us an opportunity to say to the football club, we are the democratically elected fans organisation. We are taking these questions right to the club. You can join the Supporters Trust, fulhamsupporterstrust.com/join us, right, for £10, and you can have a voice and a stake in the running of your football club. If Fulham football, and they talk about fan groups being representative. Well, they say that we don't have enough members. That's what they say. They say, well, we can cobble up together. Craven Cottage holds 27,000. They don't sell out. They say, well, I can have a focus group of 27,000 fans because they buy the tickets, right? Let's be absolutely clear about this. They think it's absolutely fine because whoever buys the tickets, the stadium is going to be full. And away ticketing, this is the only play, that's the big thing. I mean, I don't know why people aren't saying to the Football Association, what are you doing with your competition? Why, absolutely insane that one of the best ties of the last round, Exeter City against Nottingham Forest, which I was privileged enough to be at, was scheduled against the Champions League, right? Why? We can take these questions to everybody. But if you're as angry about it as the correspondent was, if you're as angry about it as we've been and still are, and as exercised about it, you do have the opportunity not just to join the Supporters Trust, but to get involved. I've done 20 years on the Supporters Trust board. I stepped away for 1 year and I was so incensed at what I was reading that I've decided to go back in. Right, and it may take another 20 years to make some progress on this. Right, and I'm lucky to be able to have the time. I appreciate that not everybody has the time to attend 10 meetings and do those things. But if you're not going to Manchester United because of the pricing, have a think about where your £10 might be better used, and think about, from someone who's tired of this, a plea to join the Supporters Trust. You may not agree with everything that we put out. You may agree with precisely none of it, but you will have the ability to put those views forward in a forum that's documented every month, and we'll get an answer. And the pressure will come on the decision makers in that way. Because Fulham Football Club will existed before Alistair McIntosh, before Shad Khan, and graciously it will exist after those people as well. Because it's not actually the board who run the football club. The fans pay and make this club so special. And that is why we have to stand united on matters such as this. And I'm sorry to have talked over both of you.
No.
I have to
great.
take the opportunity to ask your listeners and viewers to get involved, because sometimes it's a very lonely place when you field these questions from people who should know and do know better.
Yeah. I guess one other point that I wanted to make just before Saturday, more of a kind of info note, is if you're in the Putney end, just maybe have a look on the Fulham website about the bag regulations. I don't really want to get into it. I don't really want to get into it now, but basically they said that because Palace fans brought pyro to the last game at Craven Cottage, that all fans in the Putney end basically now can't have a regular sized bag. Fulham. And
Soon they'll be banning people from coming into the ground as well. Anyway.
That'll do for the pod today. I've made everyone despair. Jack Collins, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sammy. Always a pleasure.
Dan, lovely to have you, and such touching words at the top of the pod as well about Paddy Barclay. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure. God, may rest in peace, Paddy.
Yeah. We will be back on Monday. Jack's hosting the pod, looking back at the Palace game, and then we will return with the Thursday Club next week after Wolves. I'm going to Wolves, actually. That's one thing I want. That's actually,
see you there, mate. Yeah,
that's one thing. Right. Everyone's moaning about the ticket prices for Manchester United, and it's totally reasonable, and the travel options and stuff. If you have, Wolves has not sold well.
That's an understatement.
The tickets are 30 quid, so that's reasonable. You can get back from London on a direct train. There is a 9:45 train.
Good luck if you're going to make that train.
And what? His game's tickets are at 7:30. Latest it'll finish is 9:20?
Remember the time you said that.
Right. And
when I get a call
there's
from
even
Sammy James,
I'm going to see him running.
No, there's a 10:40, and if it all goes to pot, there's a 10:45 train direct back to London. Project Wolves. Forget United.
This is where Sleepy found Sammy came into it.
Yeah. Anyway, that was.
If you find Sammy James asleep on that train home from Wolves, please take a picture and send it to me.
I've done a breakfast show. Leave me alone.
Day sleepers. Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening today. Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Dan. Have a great weekend. You whites.
You whites.